Hi, this is my tier list of books I read in 2024. I read 28 books. Most of them were pretty good, so I don't know how much of a tier list this will be. Um, but these are in order. Oh my God. I have a big stack and I almost fell. A Clockwork Orange. This book is really good. There's a Stanley Kubrick movie about it, or based on it. And it's about this group of youths in the future, and they're kind of like hyper violent. And the book is written in this weird mixture of like made up slang and Russian, and all the characters speak in it, and the book is written in it, and it's really hard to understand. But by the end of the book, you kind of get you could just kind of like read it at a point, which is really cool. I used to kind of be able to speak it while I was reading the book, but I forgot everything now. Um, Oh, I'm gonna have to like look for the book every time I do this. Oh yeah. I'd say I'm doing this on a harsh scale. So like B I think is still like a really good book. Like I would recommend this to people to read. And I think S is reserved for like life changing. Like if the book is life changing, it gets S. And then if it's really extraordinarily good, it gets A. And then B is still good. C is fine. And I think D is just like I wish I hadn't read it, probably. So that's A Clockwork Orange. Um, then In Our Time by Ernest Hemingway. I read a lot of Ernest Hemingway this year because he's probably one of my favorite authors. And he's an American, which I kind of like because I think it's kind of cool to read American authors because it's one of the art forms that we kind of excel at but are maybe underappreciated in. This is a lot of short stories. I don't remember any of them except for one called Indian Camp, and it is one of the most like I was reading it. I used to work at a seafood restaurant, and on Sundays I would sometimes work by myself in the kitchen, and I was reading this because like nothing was happening. It was a slow time, and I read the story Indian Camp, which I think is the first one in here. Maybe it might actually not be called Indian Camp. I don't remember. No, it's called Indian Camp, and it's incredible. And I had to leave because I was crying. I had to like go out back, which is like I don't think a book has ever made me do that anymore. So I think just on the basis of that story, I think it gets S tier because it's probably the greatest short story I've ever read in my life. The Tempest by Shakespeare. I got into Shakespeare for some reason. I think it's supposed to be a comedy. It's about this like sorcerer. I didn't really understand it, and honestly, I was not a fan. It's not very good. Dubliners by James Joyce. This is also short stories by James Joyce, who is an Irish writer in, I think, like the early 1900s. He's a really great writer, and these stories are very good. I'd put this in the oh God, all the covers are different down here. I'd put this in like the B tier. I think it's a really good book. Um, Maybe could be moved up to A, but it's very good. It's very good. But also it's kind of hard to read. It's old and it's kind of hard to read. Um, The Sun Also Rises by Ernest Hemingway. This book is pretty extraordinary. I have a friend who I talk about this book a lot with. I have several friends who I talk about it a lot. It's kind of all of Ernest Hemingway's books are extremely autobiographical, and this book is about a newspaper writer. It takes place mostly in France, but he kind of moves around. Some of it's in Spain, and he's kind of in love with this nurse who he met in Italy. It's a very sad book, and it's just very interesting. It's really good. I also there's this one sentence that reads like music. It is crazy. It's like it I don't think there's any punctuation, but it just forces you to punctuate it, and it is incredible. Um, it's after this man is killed in a oh my God, I found it. So a guy dies in a bullfight and gets transported out of the city. And it said the train started with a jerk and then ran smoothly, going down grade around the edge of the plateau and out into the fields of grain that blew in the wind on the plain on the way to Tafalla. It's kind of remarkable. It's one of those books I read over a long time, and then the last 70 pages I read like all in one day because it's so incredible. Um, yeah, so I think that goes A tier. Probably. I'm gonna move this down to A tier because it's really good, but it's not like no, no, never mind. I think if something makes you cry in its writing, it has to be the top. Um, Sirens of Titan. This is another one of my favorite American guys, Kurt Vonnegut. This is I think the first book that he published outside of his short stories. I couldn't tell you the plot. Um, there's a lot on Earth. Some stuff happens on Mars. Some stuff happens on the moon, Titan of Jupiter. The ending is spoiled in the beginning, and this like long, crazy prophecy, almost like a tragedy, like Oedipus in a weird way, like where all the events they're just bound to happen and they end up happening, but it's completely absurd. And I think it's kind of an absurdist book, and the ending is utterly beautiful. Like it's just it's so lovely. Um, this goes S tier. This is one of my favorite books ever. Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck. I think this was the first book I read last year. I think it's pretty good. It's a classic. Also an American author. I'll shout out all my American authors because America really just has it so hard. Um, what's that? Mice and Men. Uh, I'd say B. I think it's very good. It's also kind of like him and Faulkner and stuff, and these old American writers are super socialist. Hemingway too. I mean, Hemingway is a book where the character is fighting in Spain in the Communist Army. Hamlet. This is my favorite Shakespeare play. Um, Also, I think it's kind of an absurdist work. It's one of those also just like canon um, works of literature, like Hamlet and Oedipus and the Odyssey and things like that. It's just so good. Um, Hamlet, I think, is kind of a relatable character in a way, and the greatest part, the stab through the curtain, also kind of meaningless. It's like insane, meaningless events happening. So I put it A. A Midsummer's Night Dream by Shakespeare. This is fun. It's a again, it's not. It's really not that good. Um, and I'm not a Shakespeare hater because I really like Hamlet and I really like some of the other stuff. I think this has been Midsummer's Night Dream. I'll put it C. I think it's fine. It's better than I don't like The Tempest. That's something I really don't like. Portrait of an Artist as a Young Man. This is also by James Joyce, uh, who wrote Dubliners. It's split into 5 parts, so it's kind of this like 5 act structure, and it is about a boy becoming an artist. But there's like 100 themes in it. There's like Catholicism, Protestantism, Irish nationalism is a huge part of it. Lust, guilt. Uh, there's this really funny part where he goes to church and there's this guy. He has sex with a prostitute, right? After he does that, and he's pretty young too. He goes to church and there's this like sermon or something, I don't know. And the priest is like yelling like hell, fire, and he's like terrified. And the speech goes on for 10 pages. Like as you're reading it, you're like, oh, is this just what the rest of the book is? And then eventually it ends, but it is like 10 pages long. Um, as a um, as a boy, I'd say this book is like it gets extra points with me, because I'm a young boy So who likes art? So it gets extra. Dead-Eye Dick. This is one of the lesser Kurt Vonnegut novels, I would say, but it's really, really funny. There's a part where these guys throw a dude down the stairs. The police throw a guy down the stairs, and they say, "How do you like that, you Nazi N word?" Which is just like really funny to me. I think this is actually based off Hamlet because it also has this like it's just crazy events that don't really mean anything. But in Hamlet, there's a scene where he stabs his sword through the curtain, and he doesn't know who's on the other side, and he kills a man named Polonius, I think maybe, and he doesn't really care. Like he doesn't want to kill him. That person is also the father of the woman who Hamlet is in love with, and him killing her father causes her to most likely kill herself and her brother to try to kill Hamlet, even though he doesn't know what he's doing. In this book, the main character goes to the top of his house and he takes a gun and he just shoots out the window for no reason, and he kills a woman who's vacuuming, a pregnant woman, and it the child, his father takes responsibility, and that's why the cops throw him down the stairs. Pretty interesting. Oh, I need to rank it. I'd say B, or maybe yeah, B, B. I don't know. Um, Jesus' son, my friend Angus Garing on Bandcamp, Angus Garing. He wrote this. No, he didn't write it. He recommended. He wishes he wrote this book. He recommended this to me because in the song "Heroin" by Velvet Underground, he says just like Jesus' son, which is a reference to this book, and it is all these short stories about this heroin addict, which is pretty cool. They're super short. It's so funny and so depressing, but it's really incredible. My theory about this book is that it's told in reverse. I think it's not clear because all the stories are so disparate. Even though it follows one character, they're all super different. I think it's I think the first story is the last chronologically. I think Jesus's son gets A. Yeah, very good. I think it was written in the 70s. I think by an American. So, yeah. The Stranger by Camus. This book is lit. Um, it's extremely famous. I think Camus won a Nobel Prize for Literature for this book, which Hemingway also has a Nobel Literature Prize. I think those are the only two authors that I've read that have this year that have literature Nobel Prizes, unless Joyce does, because I feel like Joyce should, but I don't think he does. Um, Camus, this is his philosophy is absurdism, and The Stranger is about this character. This gets S tier for sure because I've just like talked about it with so many people. So many people have read it, but essentially it's this character. He goes through his life pretty much without any sense of morality or any religion or any like power above him, completely emotionless. And it serves him well sometimes. I think the best example of this is he kind of just is hedonistic. He's just like pursuing pleasures. And there's this woman he's with, and they have sex. And then she's like laying there. She goes like, "Oh, I love you." And he's like, I don't love you, but like, it's okay. Like, it's cool that you love me, basically. And then she says like, "Can we get married?" And he's like, "Yeah, sure. I don't give a fuck. Whatever you want." And something about that is freeing, but it also holds him back. He can't experience the joys of life. And I think Camus' argument here is forget all this dumb stuff. Forget all the religious morality, all the hierarchy, all the genre, all the dividing lines that we put, and all the higher things that we think of that we need to live like. Why am I wearing these? Oops. Um, and to just live. Uh, but then once you've thrown off all those things, just accept things. Just accept that you can be in love. Even if love is like a abstract concept that's not real, just make it real. Just do it, kind of. I don't know. That's a really stupid way. Like if I was writing a paper, I would get my thoughts out better. And then what happens is for no reason he shoots someone, which I'm realizing is kind of a thread through these because in Sirens of Titan and Hamlet and now this, there's a meaningless killing for no reason. I'm trying to think, is there in other ones too? Mice and Men has a killing, but it's for a reason. Clockwork Orange, they also kill someone, but I think it's kind of for a reason. I don't know. I don't know. But in this, he kills a man for no reason. Essentially goes to prison. Everyone in society, they testify against him because they say all the things that seem terrible because he just was living completely like in the beginning he doesn't cry at his mother's funeral. Like he goes to his mother's funeral, but he doesn't really show any emotion, and they use that as like crimes against society. They put him away in jail. Then he's sitting in jail. He's looking out the window. He knows he's going to be executed, and he's like watching the birds fly over the ocean. I need to reread this book, but he just is overcome by the beauty of Earth, kind of. And this priest walks into his room to give him his like final rites before he's executed, or a chaplain or something. And the chaplain is like, accept God into your life, whatever. And he's like, get the fuck out of my cell. Let me watch the birds. And the chaplain's like, what are you talking about? And he forces this guy to leave and then walks out. And it's like he's ready to die. It's so interesting. Like, I actually don't think I even have a good understanding of this book because I think my understanding of it, this like this book flipped a little switch in my brain at some point, and it's let me interpret everything afterwards in this new way. And definitely need to go back and read this again because it's so interesting. But I already, yeah, S tier. Winner Take Nothing by Kurt Von no, Ernest Hemingway. This is also short stories. Um, I remember it being good, and it's like Hemingway, so I probably liked it, but I don't remember any of the books in it. So I'll give it like C tier, I guess, because I don't know. I also can't find it. Oh, wait. There's a lot of Hemingway in here. Winner Take Nothing. C. Yeah. Oh, Communist Manifesto. Uh, Frederick Marx and or Karl Marx and Frederick Engels. It's good. I stole this from a Barnes and Noble because I'm fighting back against the industry, man. It's good. It's kind of one of those things where it's like I haven't read like Das Kapital or any of the other books by these two guys, even though I know they're really good. And I think those books are probably a lot more interesting and are adding things to this conversation. But the Communist Manifesto, I think, is meant to just be a pamphlet that you can hand out to anyone and they can understand it. So it doesn't really bring much like didn't really like challenge my mind in any way. Like I already understood basically what he's saying because he's not giving the reasons. He's just saying it's like a call to arms. I actually think like the last sentence is, and I didn't read this full book because there's like a bunch of reference material in it, but the actual book is not that long. But at the end, I forget the last line, but whatever. It's interesting to read because it's so historically important. Like so many people read that book and started a revolution. And I agree with most of what it says, but it's like just not that interesting of a read. Um, Made in Madagascar. This was a book I read for my anthropology class. Um, it's very cool. Anthropology is very cool. I'm not an anthropologist, but anthropology is very cool. It's just kind of it's an ethnography, which in anthropology is like when someone goes to a place, and ethnographers are obsessed with the word holistic or holistic. It's like you take in everything about this culture, the way they dance, the way they eat, the way they talk, the way their relationships with each other, where they live, like everything about them And this is really cool. It's like there's like the sapphire mining going on. There's ecotourism. There's like this cave they all walk out into, and usually the guys that write these things and women, um, they do a really good job of making it like an actual story. And it's really interesting. So I'd say that's like, uh, it's kind of weird because this is kind of like a separate category of reading. But C, and remember, C is like still good. Like it's good. Neutral Accent is about India. It's another book I read for my anthropology class. It's an ethnography centered on Indian call centers, and it is actually fascinating. Like these people have to work night shifts to line up with our time zone, and they mostly serve the UK and America and Australia. So if they work in an Australian center, the time zone isn't that different, but for the UK and America, it's hugely different, and they have to like learn American culture and learn English and learn to speak English without an accent. So like when you call support, sometimes you might think it's an American and it's actually not. And they even have to learn how like our street systems work. Like there was an example here where somebody was calling and they were telling them like to get their new credit card they needed to go to the bank, and it must have been like an older person because they didn't have like Google Maps, and they were asking the person in the call center like, how do we get to the bank, how many blocks is it, and the person in India could not understand what the concept of block was. Like that's not a word that they used, or like a concept of like this many blocks. And it's interesting just to see how different cultures are. And then it goes in and it becomes a pretty like socialist thing at the end where it's like you're just focusing on production. Like these people are killing themselves working night shifts, and it's pretty sad, but it's very interesting. I'd say that's B. Pretty lit. Um, this black book. This is Ernest Hemingway. This is For Whom the Bell Tolls. I just have a cool like really old version of it that I got at a place. I think it says when it was published in here, 1944. It's pretty cool. It is falling apart though. It's a great book. It's about a kid who goes and fights in the Spanish Civil War in the, uh, I guess it was like the late 30s, I think, right before World War II. He, which is a really interesting war because there's these like monarchists who teamed up with fascists, and that side was supported by Germany and Italy before. It's like World War II light, kind of. So they had all these like German and Italian weapons. And then on the other side, in Barcelona, there's these anarchists, and they teamed up with communists, and their coalition is funded by Russia. So, and communism. And a lot of it was a very idealistic war. So a lot of people came into this war. So like Orwell, I believe, was fighting with the anarchists in this war. George Orwell, who wrote 1984. Hemingway didn't fight in the war, but he was a correspondent for a newspaper, and he was deeply embedded with the communist forces. And the book follows a American who is fighting for communism just out of ideology. He's a communist, and he goes and fights for him. It's really interesting. It shows like the weird inner dynamics that it's like this guerrilla war. Um, it's very cool. And also this weird thing I realized as I read more Hemingway. Every story ends. He loves women so much. It was the death of him, possibly. That and the drinking. Um, he is obsessed with women. And he, like, the end of this story, the woman leaves. It's over. The end of The Sun Also Rises, the woman leaves and it's over. It's very tragic. He's also a man that's married 4 times. Probably should never have been married, I think. Um, this is For Whom the Bell Tolls. I'd say this is A. It's a really incredible book. Actually, I'm gonna put it B, but it's a high B. It's really good. Um, this is, I think, the last Hemingway book in here. Yeah, it is. This is A Farewell to Arms. This is my favorite of Hemingway's books. This is about an American, the Italian. in Italy, the Italian nurse is back. He falls in love with the Italian nurse named Catherine. Well, she's actually Scottish, but or she's British or Scottish, and she's Scottish. She's Scottish. Britta and the other I'm a nerd. Um, she's Scottish and she's a nurse. They fall in love. I just read this really interesting thing about this book. One of the most depressing endings of any book ever. This was the only other book that probably made me kind of cry. Wait, I'm switching this up to A again. And then I'm putting this is an S book. It's a really great book. Like, you should go read it. Um, God Bless You, Mr. Rosewater by Kurt Vonnegut. This book made me a socialist. I've always been kind of a socialist, I think, but I was self loathing. And this book made me not self loathing. I was like, shit, it's crazy. It's that simple. We should just kind of help people out. Um, this is another beautiful book. It's a crazy book. Doesn't make a lot of sense. Wait, Dead-Eye Dick. What is slapstick? Wait, Dead-Eye Dick. Did I read a book called Slapstick? I did. Whatever. Okay. Where's this book? God. Oh, it's this. Okay. This is S tier. Really good. It's about this guy who comes from all this wealth and he kind of throws it away and he lives in a tiny town in a shack. He volunteers for the fire department and he just gives. He only gives. And people cannot take it. People hate him for giving. Except for the people of the town, which love him, even though they're stupid people, which is funny. They're like, most of them in the town, it's like, it's kind of a weird thing. It's like they're presented originally as these stupid, just like backwater small town people. But then they're kind of all beautiful. They are just like kind of beautiful. Even like the ones that are like pointed out as being exceptionally like stupid. Um, Candide by Voltaire. Apparently this is super famous. My friend just read it. And I was like, oh yeah, I've read that. And he was like, duh, it's famous. But I think I bought it because it was $2.50 and it was short and I read it. And my thing, I was like trying to read 2 books a month, and I only had a couple days left, so I bought this tiny book. I think the point of it is that like it's not gonna work out. Like the worldview that like, oh, it's all going to be everything points to good, like all the evil of the world is happening because it will eventually become good. It throws that away. The book could have been 10 pages long, I think, but instead it's like 100 pages long, and it's about a guy named Candide, and he grows up in this beautiful castle. It gets raided, and then from then on, his life is utterly horrible over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. He goes like it's like the Lisbon earthquake, which destroyed most of Lisbon in Portugal. Is like a famous thing that a bunch of philosophers talked about at the time because it was like if there's a God, that was their like thing at the time. Um, if there's a God, how did he let this happen? And Candide is in Lisbon when the earthquake hits. He gets like his like the woman he loves is like killed and raped in front of him. Then like he finds her again and somehow she didn't die. And then she's like taken away again. It's like horrible. It's just I think he had fun writing this. And it's just not that good. It kind of sucks. But I think it's like a famous, I mean, Voltaire is like one of the most famous philosophers. I mean, I live in his country, basically. Um, Bag and Bow Snuff Box by Kurt Vonnegut. These are short stories. This is good. I'll do C. A lot of them are mid, the stories, because I think there are a lot of his early stuff that he published in magazines, like science fiction magazines. But there's this really funny story about a band director who is obsessed with making this high school band like the best band, and he has this obsession that he needs the biggest drum, like the drum that you go like dum dum dum, and he needs the biggest drum possible. And there's this one kid who's unmusical and sucks, but the kid is like, if I bring you the drum, will you let me play it? And he's like, no, not really. And then the kid shows up and he's got the 10-foot tall drum. And the teacher's like, you have to let this other kid play it because you're not good enough. And the kid's like, can't have the drum. And the last scene is he's like, they describe the thudding and thudding of him rolling the drum up the hill and away from the band teacher. And that's the end of the story. There's like no point to the story. It's so funny. And I was like, it's just over. And then what happens is the same character at the same band in the same high school. There's three more or two or three more stories in the book about the same dude, and it's like utterly pointless every time. Like there's nothing that I can't even remember what happens because it's just pointless. And I found that like so funny for some reason. And I was reading this a lot while I was camping with my friend for his birthday, my friend Miles Rumsey. So yeah, one book that I don't have a physical copy of because I returned it because I was borrowing it from someone is No Longer Human. This was given to me. Okay, it's written by a Japanese author, and it's I guess it's like a nihilist book. It's cool. It's written in a cool way. It's like I kind of forget what it was about, but it was like this guy. I remember the craziest scene is he kind of lives in squalor, even though he doesn't have to, and he can't really interact with other people. And there's a scene where he has this kind of like girlfriend who I think is a lot older than him, and she says she wants to kill herself, and they're gonna kill themselves together. And they stand up on the bridge, and he counts down from three, and she jumps, and he doesn't. It's crazy. Um, but yeah, I returned this. I used to work at a German restaurant in North Carolina called Google Huff, and uh, this guy Pedro, who was Cuban, worked with me, and he was like the only guy my age, so he was my friend. But yeah, he loaned me this book, and in return, I gave him The Old Man and the Sea by by Hemingway, which is like about an old fisherman in Cuba, which might have been a dumb thing to give to someone who is Cuban. I don't know. I'd say this is B. It was a cool book. I really enjoyed it. Weird. Um, Miss Dalloway, my friend Phoebe, had me read this. Unfortunately, I think this might be the only female author that I read, which isn't great. Um, and it was because a woman told me to read it. But it was a great book. I think Virginia Woolf's a really great writer. I'm not into the style of this era. Like Joyce and Virginia Woolf, I think have a similar kind of style, which I don't totally fuck with. But it was cool. I liked it. I'll give it B tier. Um, I actually don't remember reading this story, to be honest. I have no idea what it's about. Slapstick presents an apocalyptic vision seen through the eyes of the current king of Manhattan. I remember this now. A wickedly irreverent look at the all too possible results of today's follies. But even in the end, like as we know it, is transformed by there's final slapstick. I do remember that there was like a thing where like the world got hit by a disease or something, so there's not that many people, and there's a guy who is the king of Manhattan, and he collects candlesticks and lives in the Empire State Building. And there's only three other people in New York City. And I also remember that there was maybe a king of Michigan who controlled most of the Midwest and was like a military guy. Because I don't remember it, I'm gonna give it C. I remember enjoying it, but like I just don't remember it at all. Air Raid by Alexander Kluge. I have no idea why I read this book, but it was incredible. It's a look at. It's about. First, I thought it was a history book, but it is like a narrative. But see, it's got like diagrams of stuff. It's about these World War II bombers flying over Germany, and it talks in like this extremely analytical way that kind of just makes you think differently about warfare, kind of. Um, it's so analytical. It like removes so all of the human component from war that it kind of like makes you realize like, oh my God, so many people are dying and we don't even think about it really. Um, it talks about like the formation of the fight of the bombers, all this insane stuff. It's really incredible. I think it's the bombing of air raid on Halberstadt on April 8th, 1945. So the whole book is about one air raid, and it's from like hundreds of different or not hundreds. It's from the angle of like the guys who commanded it, the guys and the bombers, the people on the ground, the people on the watch post, a German chaplain, American soldiers, German soldiers, all sorts of people, like every single angle about one like couple hour span of bombing. It's really great. I'd say this is B. It's very good. The Myth of Sisyphus. This is. I originally bought this because you need to be 18 to buy spray paint, and my friend wanted spray paint who's not 18, who not really my friend, like a friend of a friend who I like. Um, and she gave me like 20 bucks and was like, get this spray paint, then you can spend the rest of it on whatever you want. And I just went to Barnes and Noble, and I thought that this was like the Greek tale, like the myth of Sisyphus, the guy pushing the rock. Turned out it's by that guy who wrote The Stranger, Albert Camus. This like introduced me to him. And this is like the essay form of absurdism. He supposedly worked in cycles, where every cycle would have a play, a novel, and a essay. This is the essay in the Stranger's cycle, and I started reading it, but it's really dense. It's a really dense text, and I really liked it. But it took me, I stopped reading it and I read The Stranger. The Stranger gave me an understanding of what was happening because it's a story, it's easier to understand. And then I went back and I finished it. It's a great book, it's a great essay. Really interesting, talks about a lot of stuff. I'd say A tier. And then the last one, this video is so long. No one's even going to watch to this point, which is fine. Um, this is a collection of like all of Kafka's works, except for the castle and whatever his other like bigger novel is, I think. I just read all of it and it was good. The Metamorphosis is most famous, like the guy that wakes up as a cockroach. There's a really great one about a hunter. Actually, Kafka is mentioned by name in the Myth of Sisyphus as an absurdist writer. And he really is. It's crazy stuff. It's really odd. You don't really know what's happening, and a lot of things happen for no foreseeable reason. This is hard to rank because I'll put it A because like some of the stuff is really incredible in it. But yeah, that's all the books I read. I'll make the next version of this in 1 year. All right.